the crisp Boston morning air, carrying the salty tang of the nearby harbor and the distant hum of city life, did little to soothe Sophia Sinclair's fluttering nerves. A fine, persistent drizzle slicked the historic cobblestone streets of the financial district, mirroring the uneasy blend of exhilaration and trepidation that churned within her. Today marked a monumental step. Her first day as an intern at Meridian Technologies, a formidable powerhouse in the national tech sphere, its sleek modern offices commanding an entire floor of a new, imposing skyscraper that pierced the New England sky. Securing this internship had been an arduous journey. The competition was a relentless gauntlet, easily 10 hopefuls vying for each coveted spot, followed by a grueling series of interviews that tested not just her knowledge, but her composure. And now, Sophia, a recent summa cum laude economics graduate from a prestigious local university, stood before the imposing brushed steel and glass doors. Behind them lay not just an office, but the potential launchpad for the brilliant career she had meticulously planned and fervently dreamed of. With a deep, steadying breath, Sophia adjusted the collar of her carefully chosen, yet modestly priced navy blazer, a silent armor against the unknown, and pushed open the heavy door, stepping into her future. The lobby of Meridian Technologies was a testament to understated power and cutting-edge design. Cool marble floors gleamed under strategically placed recessed lighting, reflecting the abstract modern art that adorned the minimalist walls. The air, filtered and subtly scented with something clean and vaguely expensive, vibrated with the quiet efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Behind a sweeping contemporary reception desk, a poised young woman with an impeccably styled bob and a practiced, professionally warm smile looked up. "Sophia Sinclair, I'm here for the internship in the marketing department," Sophia stated, her voice a notch higher than she'd intended, betraying a hint of her inner turmoil. The receptionist, whose name tag read Jessica, consulted her monitor with a few swift keystrokes. "Ah, yes, Miss Sinclair. Welcome to Meridian Technologies." Jessica handed her a temporary ID badge on a lanyard. "Mr. Damien Croft, our head of marketing, is expecting you. It's straight down this main corridor. His office is the third door on your right. You can't miss it. It's the large corner office." Sophia's heart gave an extra hard thump. Damien Croft. The name had been a recurring motif during her interview process, often spoken with a mixture of awe and hushed caution. Whispers painted him as a marketing visionary, the architect of Meridian's most successful campaigns, but also as a man of formidable temper, whose exacting standards often veered into a realm of imperious, almost tyrannical demand. The main office floor of Meridian Technologies was a sprawling vista of glass and brushed metal, an open concept design that fostered a sense of transparency, yet simultaneously felt like a meticulously arranged stage. Sunlight, though muted by the drizzly day, poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a stunning panoramic sweep of Boston Common and the Charles River in the distance. Employees, uniformly clad in sharp business attire, moved with a focused intensity, their keyboards clattering in a rhythmic symphony of productivity. Sophia felt the weight of dozens of fleeting, curious glances as she navigated the wide aisle, her sensible heels clicking softly on the polished concrete floor. She tried to project an air of confidence she didn't quite feel, her mind racing with her father's oft-repeated advice: be diligent, be observant, and always treat everyone with respect, no matter their station. She was determined to embody those principles to prove her worth through sheer hard work and a keen intellect. Finally, she reached it. A frosted glass door with a simple, elegant plaque: Damien Croft, Head of Marketing. Taking another deep, fortifying breath, she smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from her blazer and knocked. A polite, firm rap. "Enter!" The voice that cut through the door was sharp, decisive, and carried an unmistakable edge of impatience, sending an involuntary shiver down Sophia's spine. This was it, the first true test. Damien Croft's office was precisely what one might expect of a man of his reputed stature and temperament. It was expansive, occupying a prime corner of the building, with 2 walls of floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding, almost regal view of the Boston skyline. The decor was aggressively modern and minimalist, dominated by a massive, dark mahogany desk that seemed more like a command station than a piece of furniture. It was surprisingly clear of clutter, holding only a sleek, high-end laptop, a multi-line phone system, and a single, starkly elegant pen holder. Croft himself, a man in his late 40s, was the epitome of corporate power. His silver-streaked dark hair was impeccably styled, his features sharp and angular, and his eyes, a cool, piercing shade of blue, seemed to miss nothing. He was engrossed in a video conference on a large wall-mounted screen, his voice crisp and authoritative as he issued a series of directives. He gestured dismissively towards a severe leather chair opposite his desk, without even looking at Sophia as she quietly entered. "Sophia Sinclair, the new intern, sir," she announced, trying to project a calm professionalism, though her stomach was doing nervous flip-flops. After a few more clipped sentences into his headset, Croft ended the call and swiveled his imposing ergonomic chair to face her. His eyes, devoid of any warmth, raked over her from head to toe in a slow, deliberate assessment that made Sophia feel like an insect under a microscope. It was clear he was cataloging every detail: her slightly damp blazer, her nervous posture, the hopeful yet apprehensive glint in her eyes. "Ah, Sinclair, yes, your resume was adequate," he pronounced, the word adequate delivered with a subtle sneer that made it sound like an insult. "Let's be clear. I run a tight ship here. I expect nothing less than 110%. Deadlines are sacrosanct, initiative is mandatory, and I have zero tolerance for incompetence or, frankly, any form of time wasting. This isn't a university field trip. This is Meridian Technologies. Perform or you're out. Am I understood?" His tone was flat, devoid of encouragement. Sophia swallowed hard against the rising tide of intimidation. "Yes, Mr. Croft, perfectly. I'm eager to learn and contribute in any way I can." "Good," he said, though his expression didn't soften. "Your first task, then. Get me a coffee. Black, double shot of espresso, no sugar, and I expect it back here, on my desk, in under 5 minutes. The staff kitchenette is down the hall to the left. Don't get lost." He turned back to his computer, already absorbed in his emails, effectively dismissing her. The abruptness was jarring. Sophia exited his office, her cheeks burning. She'd anticipated a brief orientation, perhaps an introduction to the team, or a rundown of her initial projects, not an immediate dispatch on a menial errand delivered with such cold disdain. Finding the kitchenette wasn't difficult. It was a small, well-equipped space with gleaming stainless steel appliances. The high-end espresso machine, however, looked rather complicated, a bewildering array of buttons, dials, and steam wands. Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she tried to decipher the instructions, her mind replaying Croft's dismissive tone. She was acutely aware of the 5-minute deadline ticking away. "Don't mess this up, Sophia. It's just coffee, but it's your first impression." She carefully selected the beans, ground them, tamped the espresso, and finally, after a few nerve-wracking moments, a stream of rich, dark liquid began to fill the small ceramic cup. It smelled divine. With a sigh of relief, she picked up the cup, her movements overly cautious, and started back towards Croft's office. She was concentrating so intently on keeping the coffee level that she barely registered the hurried footsteps approaching from an intersecting corridor. A young man, probably another junior employee, eyes glued to his phone, juggling a stack of files, rounded the corner without looking. He cannonballed directly into her outstretched arm. Sophia let out a small involuntary cry. The ceramic cup flew from her grasp, arcing through the air in what felt like slow motion, before its scalding contents erupted, a dark, devastating geyser, directly onto the pristine, cream-colored cashmere sweater and expensive tailored trousers of Damien Croft, who had just stepped out of his office, presumably heading to an important engagement. For a horrified, suspended moment, the world stopped. The only sound was the clatter of the empty cup hitting the polished floor and shattering into a dozen pieces. Sophia stared aghast at the rapidly spreading dark brown stain blossoming across her new boss's chest, a hideous Rorschach blot signaling the immediate and catastrophic end to her nascent career. The young man who'd caused the collision muttered a panicked, "Oh God, so sorry," and practically sprinted away, leaving Sophia alone to face the silent building storm that was Damien Croft. Damien Croft's face, initially frozen in a mask of shocked disbelief, underwent a terrifying transformation. The color drained from it, only to be replaced by a dark, mottled flush of pure, unadulterated rage that started at his jawline and crept upwards. His piercing blue eyes, moments before coolly appraising, now blazed with a furious incandescence. He looked down with an expression of utter disgust at the ruin of his expensive cashmere sweater, then slowly, ominically, lifted his gaze to Sophia, who stood rooted to the spot, the shards of the broken cup scattered around her feet like fallen hopes. The ambient hum of the office seemed to die away, replaced by a silence so profound it was almost painful. The few employees who had been in the corridor froze, their faces a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity, all eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. Sophia felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. Her blood had turned to ice water in her veins. You clumsy, incompetent imbecile! Croft finally exploded, his voice a guttural roar that ripped through the office stillness, causing several onlookers to visibly flinch. Sophia winced as if struck. She opened her mouth, a desperate apology forming on her lips, but the words were choked off by a rising tide of panic. Mr. Croft, I am so terribly sorry. It was an accident. I tripped. He bumped into me, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper, tears welling in her eyes, blurring her vision of his contorted face. An accident? Croft spat the word out as if it were poison. He gestured wildly at his ruined attire. This is a $500 sweater. These trousers are bespoke. I have a critical presentation to the board in less than 10 minutes, a presentation that could determine the trajectory of a multi-million-dollar project, and I'm supposed to walk in there looking like this? Because of your utter, unbelievable ineptitude? Do you have the faintest comprehension of the damage you've just inflicted, you witless girl? He advanced on her, and Sophia took an involuntary step back, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a sob. His proximity was overwhelming, his anger a palpable force. I can try. Maybe I can get it out. Club soda, she offered feebly, knowing how utterly inadequate it sounded, the tears now beginning to trace hot paths down her cheeks. Get it out! Croft let out a short, bark-like laugh that held no humor, only pure derision. Are you delusional? Do you think your minimum wage expertise extends to salvaging haute couture? Look at yourself. He gestured dismissively at her sensible off-the-rack blazer. You probably wouldn't even recognize quality if it slapped you in the face. People like you, with your fumbling and your cheap apologies, have no business being in a high-stakes environment like Meridian Technologies. You are a liability, a walking disaster. I knew it the moment I saw you, another entitled graduate who thinks the world owes them a living. His voice dripped with contempt, each word a carefully aimed dart designed to inflict maximum pain. Sophia stood, head bowed, shoulders shaking, the humiliation a crushing weight. The silent, staring eyes of the other employees felt like physical blows. You are fired! The words, bellowed with unrestrained fury, seemed to reverberate off the very walls, each syllable a hammer blow to Sophia's already shattered confidence. Effective immediately! Get your things, not that you have any, and get out of my sight. I don't want to see your face in this building ever again. Is that clear? His face was inches from hers, his breath hot with anger. Sophia could only manage a series of jerky, convulsive nods, completely incapable of speech. Blindly, she turned and fled, stumbling over her own feet, her vision completely obscured by a torrent of tears. She was vaguely aware of faces blurring past, of the sudden, intense silence that followed her retreat, broken only by Croft's continued, though now slightly muffled, invective. Her sole overwhelming instinct was to escape, to put as much distance as possible between herself and this place, this man, this sudden, brutal termination of a dream that had barely begun to take shape. Her first day at Meridian Technologies, a day that had dawned with such promise, had dissolved into a public spectacle of abject failure and profound, soul-searing shame. Sophia burst out of the imposing glass and steel edifice of Meridian Technologies and into the gray, drizzling Boston afternoon, her lungs burning, her mind a maelstrom of shock and despair. She ran without direction, the mocking echo of Damien Croft's, "You're fired!" a relentless torment in her ears. The sophisticated lunchtime crowds parting before her were a blur of indistinct faces. She finally found refuge on a cold, damp wrought iron bench in a small manicured green space tucked away near the waterfront, the salty air doing little to cool her burning cheeks. She collapsed onto it, her body racked with deep, shuddering sobs that seemed to tear from the very core of her being. The chill November wind, whipping off the harbor, tugged at her hair and bit through her thin blazer, but the cold she felt was a deeper, more profound chill that settled in her bones, the chill of utter desolation. How? How could a single, stupid, clumsy moment escalate into such a complete and public disaster? She had poured her heart and soul into securing this internship, envisioning it as the first crucial step on a carefully mapped career path. She'd spent countless nights studying, preparing, sacrificing social engagements, all for this. And now, within hours of starting, it was all over, reduced to a humiliating anecdote. Her mind replayed Damien Croft's face, twisted with an almost inhuman rage, his venomous words echoing with painful clarity. Imbecile, witless girl, liability. Never in her life had anyone spoken to her with such cruelty, such unbridled contempt. Her upbringing in a loving, intellectually vibrant household, with her professor father and her compassionate art historian mother, had been a world away from this brutal corporate savagery. They had instilled in her a sense of self-worth, resilience, and the importance of treating others with kindness. But nothing could have prepared her for the sheer force of Croft's malice. A fresh wave of shame washed over her as she thought of her parents. How could she tell them? How could she admit that their highly accomplished, summa cum laude daughter had been unceremoniously ejected from her prestigious internship on the very first day, not for a lack of skill or intellect, but for spilling coffee? The thought of their disappointment was almost as painful as Croft's verbal assault. With trembling fingers, Sophia retrieved her smartphone from her bag. The screen was slightly blurred through her tears. She found her father's number in her contacts and pressed call, her thumb hovering uncertainly for a moment before committing. Charles E. Sinclair answered on the third ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Sophia, my dear, how's the first day at the corporate giant shaping up? Are they suitably impressed with my brilliant daughter?" His cheerful tone, so full of paternal pride, was like a knife to her already wounded spirit. Unable to hold back any longer, Sophia's composure shattered completely. "Oh, Dad! Daddy!" she choked out, her voice breaking into a fresh torrent of sobs. "Sweetheart, Sophia, what is it? What's happened? Is everything all right? Did someone upset you?" The warmth in his voice was instantly replaced by a sharp note of concern, the kind that could only come from a deeply worried parent. Through hiccuping sobs and fragmented sentences, Sophia recounted the morning's horrific events. Her initial nervousness, the encounter with Croft, the disastrous coffee incident, his explosive rage, and the brutal public firing. She spared him the worst of the insults, the sheer vitriol, not wanting to inflict more pain, but the core of the humiliation was starkly clear. Charles Sinclair listened in absolute silence, not interrupting her tearful, rambling narrative. Sophia could almost feel the shift in the atmosphere on the other end of the line, a gradual transition from concern to a quiet, simmering anger. When she finally trailed off, exhausted and emotionally drained, there was a long, pregnant pause. "So, his name is Damien Croft, you said? Head of marketing at Meridian Technologies?" Her father finally spoke, his voice unnervingly calm, a low, controlled timbre that Sophia recognized. It was the voice he used when he was profoundly displeased or when he was about to make a decision of significant consequence. "Listen to me, Sophia. Don't you cry another tear over this. It's not your fault. You go home now. Get some rest. Try to put this out of your mind for a little while. And as for this, Mr. Damien Croft and Meridian Technologies, well, let's just say I'll be looking into this matter personally." There was an undertone in his final words, a subtle inflection of steely resolve that hinted at more than just paternal comfort. It was a promise of action, though Sophia, mired in her own misery, couldn't quite fathom what form that action might take. All she craved was the solace of her own room, a refuge from a world that had suddenly shown its cruelest face. Damien Croft stormed back into the sanctuary of his corner office, his face still flushed with residual anger. He ripped off the ruined cashmere sweater with a snarl of disgust, flinging it into the wastebasket as if it were contaminated. "Incompetent little fool," he muttered, pacing the length of his office like a caged tiger. "These universities churn out these entitled brats by the dozen. Think they can just waltz in here with their fancy degrees and zero common sense?" He yanked a spare, impeccably pressed shirt and a silk tie from a concealed wardrobe in his office. He was always prepared for minor sartorial emergencies, though nothing quite as egregious as this morning's debacle. As he changed, his anger slowly began to morph into a familiar, satisfying sense of power. He'd made an example of that girl, Sophia Sinclair. Let the rest of the department see what happened when you crossed Damien Croft, when you failed to meet his exacting standards. Fear, he'd always believed, was a far more effective motivator than any soft-handed encouragement. He glanced at his reflection in the darkened glass of his window, adjusting his tie with a practiced, confident flick of his wrist. The incident was an annoyance, a disruption, but ultimately inconsequential. The girl was nobody. He buzzed his secretary, Diane, her voice instantly deferential on the intercom. "Diane, reschedule my board presentation for 2 p.m. Inform them of a minor, unavoidable delay, and get maintenance up here to clean up that mess in the hallway. Some idiot intern made a spectacle of herself. And Diane," he added, his voice dripping with condescension, "find me another coffee, and ensure it's delivered by someone with at least a modicum of coordination this time. Perhaps you should bring it yourself to guarantee it arrives intact." He cut the connection before she could reply. His day was already off-kilter. That Sinclair girl, with her tear-streaked face and trembling apologies, had managed to rattle him more than he cared to admit. Not out of sympathy, but because her clumsiness had inconvenienced him. He prided himself on his unflappable control, and she had momentarily threatened that. But now order was restored. He was back in command. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of curt phone calls, sharp directives to his team, and the meticulous review of his presentation slides. He savored the hushed, almost fearful atmosphere that had descended upon the marketing department. His authority, he felt, had been decisively reaffirmed. When the workday finally concluded, Croft left the Meridian Technologies building with his usual air of self-importance, the earlier incident all but forgotten, relegated to the category of minor irritations. He looked forward to a relaxing evening at his exclusive Beacon Hill townhouse, a perfectly chilled martini, and perhaps a celebratory dinner at one of Boston's finest restaurants. He was, after all, Damien Croft, a master of his universe. He slept soundly that night, blissfully unaware of the undercurrents he had set in motion, oblivious to the fact that his arrogant display was about to boomerang with devastating force. The following morning, as he strode into his office, exuding his typical aura of unshakable confidence, he found a crisp, cream-colored memo placed precisely in the center of his otherwise immaculate desk. It was from Diane. "Mr. Croft," it read, "Mr. Brian Shaw, the CEO, has requested your presence in his office immediately. Furthermore, please be advised that Mr. Charles E. Sinclair, the chairman of the board and principal owner of Meridian Technologies, will be making an unscheduled visit to the office today. His estimated time of arrival is 11 a.m. Damien Croft frowned, a flicker of unease disturbing his composure. A direct summons from Shaw was unusual, but an unscheduled visit from Charles E. Sinclair himself? That was practically unheard of. Sinclair was a near-mythical figure within the company, a reclusive billionaire who typically governed his vast empire from a discreet distance, leaving the day-to-day operations to his hand-picked executives. What on earth could warrant such a sudden personal appearance? A nagging, unpleasant thought began to prick at the edges of his mind. Sinclair. Sophia Sinclair? Surely it was just a coincidence. The news of Charles E. Sinclair's impending unscheduled arrival spread through the upper echelons of Meridian Technologies like an electric current. Phones buzzed discreetly. Hushed conversations took place in hushed tones behind cupped hands, and an almost palpable air of nervous anticipation settled over the executive floor. Charles E. Sinclair was more than just the owner. He was the visionary founder, the architect of Meridian's meteoric rise, a man whose infrequent pronouncements were treated as gospel. His visits were rare, almost ceremonial, and invariably signaled something of profound importance. Damien Croft, despite his cultivated veneer of unshakable composure, felt a distinct unpleasant tightening in his chest. The CEO, Brian Shaw, had been curt and uncharacteristically evasive during their brief, tense meeting earlier, merely instructing Croft to be available and fully prepared. Prepared for what, Shaw hadn't elaborated, which only amplified Croft's growing disquiet. Could that insignificant intern, that clumsy girl, somehow be connected to this? The notion seemed preposterous, yet the shared surname? Sinclair gnawed at him with increasing persistence. He tried to dismiss it, focusing instead on mentally reviewing his department's recent triumphs, ready to showcase his indispensability. At precisely 10:58 a.m., the private elevator that serviced the executive suites chimed softly. The polished doors slid open, and Charles E. Sinclair stepped out. He was a man who commanded attention without uttering a word. In his late 50s, he possessed a quiet, understated elegance. His impeccably tailored charcoal suit was conservative, yet undeniably expensive, his silver hair neatly combed, and his eyes, a thoughtful, intelligent gray, held a keen, observant quality. There was no entourage, no overt display of power, just an aura of intrinsic authority that radiated from him. Brian Shaw, the normally unflappable CEO, hurried forward to greet him, his smile a shade too eager. "Charles, welcome. This is an unexpected pleasure." Sinclair offered a polite, almost imperceptible nod. "Brian, I trust I'm not disrupting things too much." His voice was deep, resonant, and carried a natural gravitas. Several other senior executives, who had conveniently found reasons to be in the vicinity, hovered respectfully, their expressions a mixture of awe and apprehension. Croft, standing with the other department heads near the entrance to the main boardroom, smoothed his tie and tried to adopt an expression of professional eagerness, hoping to mask the anxiety churning in his gut. "Charles, perhaps we can convene in the boardroom. I can give you an update on the quarterly projections," Shaw began, gesturing towards the large meeting space. Sinclair, however, held up a hand, a subtle gesture that nonetheless halted Shaw mid-sentence. "Thank you, Brian, but that can wait. There's a more pressing, albeit rather distasteful, matter I wish to address first." His gaze swept across the assembled executives, pausing significantly when it landed on Damien Croft. Croft felt a jolt, as if an icy finger had traced its way down his spine. The air in the corridor crackled with unspoken tension. "Mr. Damien Croft, I believe?" Sinclair's voice, though still calm, now carried a distinct edge, a sharpness that cut through the polite formalities. Croft felt his throat go dry. He straightened his shoulders, trying to project an air of confidence he was far from feeling. "Yes, Mr. Sinclair. Damien Croft, head of marketing. It's an honor to finally meet you in person, sir." He even managed a tight, professional smile. Sinclair's expression remained impassive. "Mr. Croft," he continued, his gray eyes unwavering, "I've been made aware of an incident that occurred in your department yesterday, an incident involving a new intern, a young woman by the name of Sophia. Specifically, I understand you terminated her employment. Is this correct?" Every head in the corridor swiveled towards Croft. The polite smiles on the faces of his colleagues vanished, replaced by looks of intense, guarded curiosity. The ground beneath Damien Croft's expensive Italian leather shoes suddenly felt very, very unstable. The directness of Charles E. Sinclair's question, delivered in that calm, unwavering tone, hung in the executive corridor like a gathering storm cloud. Damien Croft felt a bead of cold sweat trickle down his back. The carefully constructed facade of arrogant nonchalance he usually wore was beginning to crack. All eyes were on him, Brian Shaw's, now narrowed and speculative, those of his fellow department heads, a mixture of shock and barely concealed intrigue. He had to choose his words carefully, to downplay the incident, to frame it as a necessary, if unfortunate, managerial decision. "Mr. Sinclair," Croft began, his voice a little hoarser than he would have liked. "Yes, that is correct. There was an unfortunate lapse in professionalism on the part of the intern, Ms. Parker, I believe her name was. He deliberately fumbled with the name, trying to convey the intern's insignificance. She demonstrated a rather severe lack of basic competence and frankly caused a significant disruption, including damaging company property, my attire, just moments before a critical board presentation. Given her immediate unsuitability for the demanding environment here at Meridian Technologies, I made the executive decision to terminate her internship. It was a matter of maintaining standards, sir. He infused his tone with an air of decisive leadership, hoping to impress Sinclair with his commitment to excellence. Charles E. Sinclair listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When Croft finished, a heavy silence descended, broken only by the faint hum of the building's ventilation system. A lapse in professionalism, you say, Mr. Croft? Sinclair's voice, when he finally spoke, was dangerously soft. Damaging company property? Your attire? He paused, letting the words hang in the air. And what, pray tell, was the nature of this severe lack of basic competence that warranted such immediate and decisive action against a young woman on her very first day? Croft felt a flush creep up his neck. This was not going as planned. Sinclair was not dismissing this as a trivial matter. Well, sir, she spilled coffee all over me. It was an act of extreme carelessness, indicative of someone not cut out for the pressures of this industry. He tried to sound reasonable, put upon. Sinclair's lips thinned almost imperceptibly. Coffee, Mr. Croft? A spilled cup of coffee? And for this, you subjected a new intern, someone who was likely already nervous and eager to please, to a public tirade? You berated her, insulted her, and then summarily fired her in front of her colleagues? Croft began to stammer. Sir, I assure you my reaction was proportionate to the disruption, the lack of respect for... Respect, Mr. Croft? Sinclair cut him off, his voice now laced with an icy disdain that was far more chilling than any shout. Let me tell you what I understand about respect. I understand that you, a senior executive in this company, a man in a position of significant power and influence, chose to use that power to belittle and humiliate someone in a vulnerable position. I understand that you valued your sweater more than you valued the dignity of a young person trying to start her career. I understand you created a spectacle, not her. The blood drained from Croft's face. How could Sinclair know the specifics, the public nature of it? Unless... Mr. Sinclair, with all due respect, I believe this is being blown out of proportion. It was a minor disciplinary matter, Croft attempted, his voice losing its earlier confidence. Charles E. Sinclair took a slow, deliberate step closer, his gaze never leaving Croft's now panicked eyes. Minor, Mr. Croft? Perhaps to you. But I wonder, do you even know who Sophia truly is? Croft stared back, bewildered, a dreadful premonition dawning in his mind. Sophia? I thought her name was Parker, or something similar. Just an intern. Sinclair allowed a beat of silence, his gaze sweeping over the now completely silent onlookers, before returning to the rapidly paling Damien Croft. Then, he delivered the final devastating blow, his voice clear and resonant in the sudden stillness. The young woman you so callously dismissed yesterday, Mr. Croft, the intern you humiliated over a spilled cup of coffee. Sophia is Sophia Sinclair, my daughter, my only child. I sent her here under an assumed name because I wanted her to experience this company from the ground up, to learn the ropes without the burden or benefit of her family name, to understand the people who make Meridian Technologies what it is. It seems, Mr. Croft, she has learned a very different and far more disturbing lesson about some of the people who lead it. The silence that followed was absolute, a suffocating blanket of disbelief and dawning horror. Damien Croft looked as though he had been turned to stone, his face a mask of utter, uncomprehending shock. The name, Sinclair, now blazed in his mind like a damning indictment. He had not just fired an intern. He had publicly savaged the daughter of the man who owned everything, the man who held his entire career in the palm of his hand. The full catastrophic weight of Charles E. Sinclair's revelation descended upon Damien Croft with the force of a physical blow. The carefully constructed world of his corporate dominance, his arrogant self-assurance, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. His face, moments before attempting a semblance of composure, was now a ghastly shade of pale, slick with a sudden sheen of cold sweat. His expensive suit suddenly felt like a lead weight, his meticulously knotted tie a constricting noose. He swayed slightly, his eyes wide and vacant as they stared at the implacable figure of Charles Sinclair. The other executives in the corridor seemed to collectively hold their breath, their expressions ranging from stunned disbelief to a kind of grim, fascinated horror. Brian Shaw, the CEO, looked utterly aghast, his gaze darting between Croft and Sinclair as if witnessing an imminent execution. Your daughter? Croft finally managed to choke out, the words barely audible, his voice raspy with disbelief and a dawning, abject terror. Mr. Sinclair, I had no idea. If I had known... I swear. Charles Sinclair cut him off with a curt, dismissive wave of his hand. If you had known, Mr. Croft, that is precisely the point. Your behavior should not be dictated by a person's name or connections, but by basic human decency and professional integrity, qualities you so spectacularly failed to demonstrate. Sinclair's voice, though still controlled, now thrummed with a deep, righteous anger. My daughter came to Meridian Technologies with enthusiasm and a genuine desire to learn. She wasn't seeking preferential treatment, she was seeking experience. And the experience she received, thanks to you, was one of public humiliation, unwarranted aggression, and profound disrespect. You, Mr. Croft, have shown yourself to be not a leader but a bully. You have cultivated a culture of fear, not respect. And that is something I will not, under any circumstances, tolerate within the foundations of this company. A company I built on principles of innovation, collaboration, and mutual respect. He paused, letting his words sink in, the silence in the corridor amplifying their impact. You are concerned about a stained sweater, Mr. Croft? I am concerned about a stained corporate culture. You are worried about a delayed presentation? I am worried about the kind of leadership that prioritizes ego over empathy, arrogance over mentorship. He turned to the ashen-faced CEO. Brian, his tone was decisive, leaving no room for argument. I want Mr. Croft's employment with Meridian Technologies terminated, immediately, for gross misconduct, abuse of authority, and behavior utterly unbecoming of a senior executive. His severance will be the statutory minimum. Ensure his access to company systems is revoked by the end of the hour. I trust this is clear? Brian Shaw, visibly shaken but eager to comply, nodded vigorously. Crystal clear, Charles. It will be handled personally, right away. Damien Croft looked like a man watching his own funeral. The fight had drained out of him, replaced by a hollow, crushing despair. All his years of ambition, his carefully cultivated image, his luxurious lifestyle, all gone, wiped out by one monumental act of hubris. As for you, Mr. Croft, Charles Sinclair said, turning back for a final withering look, you may collect your personal belongings. I suggest you use this unfortunate experience as an opportunity for profound reflection on how you treat other human beings. Sometimes, the most unassuming individuals hold far more significance than your narrow worldview allows you to perceive. You have taught my daughter a harsh lesson about the corporate world. Perhaps in turn this will teach you one about humility. With that, Charles E. Sinclair turned on his heel and, with Brian Shaw scrambling to keep pace, strode towards the CEO's office, leaving Damien Croft standing alone in the corridor, a broken man amidst the stunned silence of his former colleagues. The news of his spectacular downfall and the true identity of the clumsy intern spread through Meridian Technologies with the speed and intensity of a wildfire, becoming instant company legend. The following Monday, Sophia Sinclair, no longer hiding behind an assumed name, walked back through the impressive doors of Meridian Technologies. There were no hushed whispers of pity this time, only looks of respect and a newfound curiosity. Her father had insisted she return, not for retribution, but to genuinely pursue the opportunity she had initially sought. She was quietly assigned to the Strategic Initiatives Department, a challenging role directly under a respected senior vice president known for her mentorship. There, Sophia's sharp intellect, her diligence, and her inherent kindness quickly shone through. She thrived, contributing fresh perspectives and demonstrating a quiet strength that impressed everyone she worked with. The cautionary tale of Damien Croft and the spilled coffee served as a potent, enduring reminder throughout Meridian Technologies that arrogance has a price, that true leadership is rooted in respect, and that beneath the surface, everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, for you never truly know the depth or connections of the person standing before you. The corporate landscape of Boston had one less tyrant, and one more bright, principled mind beginning her ascent.